What's up, everybody? Welcome to Show Me the Meaning, Wisecrack's movie podcast.
Show me the meaning!
My name is Jared, and I'm joined here with the Show Me the Meaning crew. We got Jacob.
Hello, hello.
And Amanda.
What's up?
And Lux.
Yo.
Ryan could not join us today because he hasn't seen the movie because he was too afraid of being shot to see it this weekend.
Gotta go to a good movie theater.
Today we're breaking down Joker, the 2019 film starring Joaquin Phoenix and Robert De Niro, directed by Todd Phillips. But before we get into that, a couple things I wanted to go through up top. So first of all, I've mentioned this a couple times. We now have articles at medium.com/wisecrack. We now have a partnership with Medium. We're publishing 2 to 3 articles a week. So check us out at medium.com/wisecrack. Share the articles, subscribe to the publication. Also, the four of us here are doing our South Park podcast. Every week, we're covering every episode as it comes out during South Park's 23rd season. It's called Respect Our Authoritas, so check that out on iTunes and subscribe to that. Also, Austin Film Festival. I'm going to be going to the Austin Film Festival. It's happening late this month. I'm going to be doing some panels. I'm going to be meeting other writers. If you would like to meet me there, if you'd like to go to some panels with me, if you'd like to just experience the whole vibe with me, go to austinfilmfestival.com. There's actually a link in the show notes. You can get $25 off a badge using the promo code Wisecrack25. Once again, it's on October 24th through 31st in Austin, Texas. And the last thing I want to mention is that Rick and Morty's coming back November 10th, and we're going to be doing our podcast, The Squanch. So search Squanch on iTunes. We're going to be covering every episode just like we have the last season, so be sure to subscribe to that. And anyway, enough with the announcements. Let's get into this movie, Joker. Let's get into first impressions. What was it like watching this movie? Let's start with Amanda.
Okay, so Jacob and I saw it together, and I don't want to steal any of his reaction, but we were spooked. I really was not expecting to like it. I'm not like a huge comic book nerd. Not that there's anything wrong with being a comic book nerd. I'm just not. And I really actually super enjoyed it. Cinematically, I thought it was completely compelling. I wasn't bored a single second. And I also think it might be bad for the world. I don't know. I'm really I've never been this conflicted about a movie.
Cool.
Wow.
Jacob?
Yeah, I was terrified, spooked, in a way that most movies don't haunt me. I watch scary movies all the time. I like them. I find them kind of pulpy and fun and silly. This was like was really chilling for me. I think I told you that after I saw it. Amanda and I probably took like 30 minutes, maybe an hour to calm down afterward, where I felt there was a couple things. It felt super imminent. It didn't, most big movies feel like the big problem, the world's going to come to an end. That's going to happen like in the far future. This felt like it could happen in 8 weeks. And then like watching crumbling Gotham looked like my street that I live on. So it was very imminent, and then it was very spooky to watch a character like that unfold and to see the rallying and excitement from the people around him. And I just felt like, man, I felt truly haunted psychologically. I just felt like it was a true spooktacular. So I was horrified, but I thought it was a beautiful movie, cinematically fantastic. Also not a huge comic book person, but found this to be like the movie that was the crossover movie. I loved it. So I thought, yeah, A+++, great job, bravo, Todd Phillips, but also scary. And Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, I wonder if having less adoration or less investment in comics, or specifically the Joker character, is actually a good thing going into this movie. Because, I want to let Lux go first before I give my opinions. Go for it, Lux.
Yeah, I had a real different reaction than you guys to this movie. I had like a tripartite reaction to this movie. There's like 3 versions of this movie that exist in my head at the same time. There's like, this movie is just a piece of cinema where it's like a C+, like it looks great, the performances are good, the script is garbage. But it's like, it looks good and the performances are great. There's the socio-political version of this movie, which is just like pure dog shit. And like incoherent nonsense. And then there's like the version of this movie that's a satire of people who give a shit about the Joker. Which is like A++ to me.
Yeah, I don't think that, like, I don't think that one's in there, but go ahead.
I don't think it's on purpose, but there's like, you don't even have to squint that hard to see that in the movie. And I can talk more about why later, but like,
the masks.
I found this movie to be so fucking funny. I thought it was, I laughed throughout the movie. And
just tonally so different.
I left laughing.
Yeah.
Were other people in the theater laughing, or were you the only one?
Me, my friend Rory, who I went with, and a few other people in the theater also seemed to find it very funny.
I think I would have been annoyed if people were laughing
Yeah.
in the theater. It would have totally killed it for me.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I just thought the movie was a big fucking joke.
the theater experience, I think, is important because I had a hard time staying in it,
Yeah.
especially.
You had someone next to you, like on their phone or something?
Yeah, someone next to me was on my phone on their phone the whole time, not on my phone. That would be really weird.
So weird. They were
Oh,
on
Jared,
your
I
phone.
think that's a nice picture.
Yeah, they were on their
truly,
phone the
it
whole
was the
time,
Joker.
kept taking me out of it. I'll start with the good. I'm wishy-washy on this film. I have very mixed feelings, and there are times when I think about it and I really appreciate it, and there are times where I don't like it. And I think the times when I don't like it is when I start considering it in the context of it being a Batman film / comic film. But let's start with the good. The good, of course, Joaquin Phoenix. Doesn't even have to be said. He's so good in everything that he does, and especially when there's a dark role, he always comes and he nails it. I like the idea that this movie is kind of looking to elevate the comic book to a cultural myth that can be gracefully molded to socio-political questions of our era. I like that movement for comic book films, and so that I like about this movie. But whenever the movie would lean into the Batman thing with Thomas Wayne, and especially the end, it just reminded me that, if you know anything about the Joker, this is a story the Joker would laugh at. And I think the greatest sin a Joker movie could ever commit is to take itself too seriously. And I think that this movie sometimes dips into that. The big thing for me was the cello. Whenever
Which I love, but
the cello is just, I mean, when you use a
like
cello,
Requiem.
like Requiem for a Dream, you are doing the most serious instrument possible. And if it were me, I would have replaced those scenes with scenes of him pleasing an audience with his acts of violence. Like, instead of him going to the bathroom and performing with like this cello, I would much prefer it be him doing that while people are laughing in the background, or he's pretending that or at least we see in his mind, because it seems like in his mind he's performing to an audience like Rupert Pupkin does in The King of Comedy. And so I would have preferred to see that rather than the cello, which all it says to me is you should be taking this very seriously because it's very
this
important.
is grave. Very important time.
Yeah.
This is a very important moment.
Having said that, I think that the cinematography is great. The performances are great. It looks great. I like the movement towards comic book movies that aren't so tied to the properties or like the comic books that they were based off of. So I like that. But we'll get into more of it. Let's go a recap. So mentally ill party clown Arthur Fleck lives with his mom in the slums of Gotham, a city that is on the brink of civil unrest due to rampant inequality. His mother, Penny, constantly sends letters to her former employer, billionaire philanthropist and future mayoral candidate Thomas Wayne, beseeching him to help her and her son. All the while, Arthur hangs on to his dream of being a comedian just like his idol, late-night host Murray Franklin. After Arthur is fired from clowning and cut off from his medication due to public services being cut, he boards a train where 3 drunk bankers assault him. He snaps and kills them. The image of a clown killing the wealthy inspires a populist movement, further fueled by Thomas Wayne's dismissal of those who can't make something of themselves as clowns. Arthur starts a relationship with his neighbor Sophie and invites her to see him do stand-up at a local club. Upon opening one of his mother's letters to Wayne, he discovers that she is claiming that Wayne is his father. So Arthur seeks out Wayne, looking for some fatherly recognition, but Wayne tells him that his mother is mentally ill and fabricated the story. After Arthur corroborates the story at Arkham Mental Asylum, it's revealed that his relationship with Sophie was a delusion. On TV, he sees that a taping of him bombing at the comedy club is the newest punchline on The Murray Franklin Show. As Arthur descends deeper into violent insanity and Gotham further into turmoil, Arthur is invited on the show. Donning his Joker makeup, Arthur accuses Murray and the rest of the wealthy of not even recognizing the have-nots as human beings. He kills Murray, starting a riot in the city. During the riot, Thomas and Martha Wayne are killed by a rioter, and Joker is applauded by the masses. In the end, Arthur is in Arkham Asylum, still laughing and still killing. End of movie. All right, guys, before we go on, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors over at Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of amazing classes covering dozens of creative and entrepreneurial skills. You can take classes in everything from photography and creative writing to design, productivity, and more. So whether you're returning to a long-time passion project, challenging yourself to get outside of your comfort zone, or simply exploring something new, Skillshare has classes for you. So, Jacob, you've taken some classes on Skillshare. Tell us about it.
Yeah, Thomas Frank has a class on productivity that I've taken that's pretty cool, which helped me kind of organize my life and my day a bit more. And then I've also taken the In a Nutshell animation class. So, In a Nutshell, another amazing, cool YouTube channel that we collaborate with in the past. And they kind of walk through how they take their illustrations and animate them. So it's a really cool class. I think they actually have a second one already out or coming out too. And then I've taken some piano classes on there too. So learning how to, I'm trying to up my game on the chord side of piano because I'm not very good. I'm better at guitar. But yeah, they've got everything. Like no matter what you want to learn, just jump on there, find a class. It's all included.
Yeah, in previous podcasts, I've talked about how I've taken a couple of their writing classes. The one I've found most helpful is the Writer's Toolkit, 6 Successful Steps to a Successful Writing Habit by Simon von Buoy. I recommend that one for those of you who just can't get yourself to sit down and write. So join the millions of students already learning on Skillshare today with a special offer just for listeners of this podcast, 2 free months. So Skillshare is offering Show Me the Meaning listeners 2 free months of unlimited access to thousands of classes for free. So to sign up, go to Skillshare.com/Wisecrack. Again, Skillshare.com/Wisecrack to start your 2 free months now. Again, Skillshare.com/Wisecrack. And now back to the show. All right, guys. So I do eventually want to get to talking about the controversy, but first let's talk about what this movie is trying to say. This is kind of a bit of a spoiler for the video that we're releasing tomorrow, or a quick take on it, but just
You
for the
live
sake,
streamers get to get it early.
yeah, for the sake of being thorough, let's talk about recognition, specifically the politics of recognition. So Arthur and his mother are seeking recognition or affection, love, the state of being recognized as a human being. Now, this is all over the film. Recognition also has a rich philosophical and political history. We've covered philosophy of recognition in a couple of videos. Most recently, we did one on Rage that talks about it a little bit. We did one years ago on Destiny 2. It's all about Hegel and recognition. But just to break down some of the things in this movie. So Arthur seeks recognition from Murray, who he fantasizes as embracing him like a father. Arthur seeks recognition from comedy audiences. His mother seeks recognition and financial help from Thomas Wayne. Arthur seeks fatherly recognition from Thomas Wayne. His counselor tells him people don't care about me or you. He doesn't feel like she's seen or heard him. The masses are seeking recognition that they are human beings and not dehumanized clowns. There are also some subtle parts that point to this. These are kind of my favorites. So when Arthur is visiting his mom at the hospital and he's outside being interrogated by the police, he struggles to be acknowledged by the automatic sliding glass door.
That's clever.
Yeah, marked exit.
I thought he was going to be just truly invisible. I was like, whoa, that's weird. And then it's like, that's an exit, buddy.
Yeah. Another subtle one, the bankers on the train are initially incensed because the woman on the train they're harassing won't recognize them. They say something along the lines
I'm here,
like,
hello.
I'm here, hello, why won't you see me? Arthur is less concerned with the political movement that spawned from his actions than by just being seen. When he goes on to the Murray Franklin show, he says, I don't believe in anything, I don't care about this movement. And we see that he also tells Murray that he doesn't see him, or that Murray doesn't see him or anyone less fortunate than him. Arthur then basks in the recognition at the end during the riot. And there's also an interesting part that Modern Times is the movie that all the rich Gothamites are watching, which is a movie that criticizes the working conditions in factories. And yet the rich are laughing it away as if they're not recognizing the point. The message of the movie seems to be, if the less fortunate are not recognized, they will resort to the loudest, most violent means necessary. So what are your guys' reaction to that as the general backbone of this movie?
I think it's the most generous possible conceptual interpretation of this movie.
Okay, go on.
I think it makes sense. Like, it's a smart read. Like, I don't want to say that saying that it's like not a good read. I think it adds up and it's in the text a lot of ways. I just think that like the movie doesn't really have a coherent ideology or message really in a lot of ways beyond the idea that like people want to be seen and heard, which I don't think is nothing. And I do think that is very present. but it doesn't make an argument about that question. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
it just sort of says that it's there.
I mean, in the sense
that
that
makes an argument, it makes an obvious, self-evident one that's borne out through history over decades.
I don't think it has necessarily a political platform, but I think that it is just saying that things are bad, people are being dehumanized, and they're not even recognized as human beings. And when that happens, horrible things can occur.
Right. To which I say, like, why is this news? Right? Like, that's been true forever.
Yeah, I mean, but there are plenty of movies that have themes that are not necessarily novel and things that are unique to today. I mean, the Marvel movies are about fathers and sons. That's something that's been a theme throughout. It's not
obligatory that a movie be pertinent to the status quo, but like Jacob, like sort of what Jacob was getting at when he was giving the description, right? Like that there's this idea that this movie is like present in time and this could happen 8 weeks from now. This also could have happened 8 weeks ago, right? Like there's nothing unique to this moment that makes this a thing that people need to hear about. And so I think a lot of the like degree to which I think it's a really good coherent read of the movie, but I just think the movie falls flat in this kind of way of like, it doesn't do anything interesting with that idea. It just states it. Do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't get my juices flowing ideologically or like intellectually because like it's just saying a thing that's true.
Well, it's hard to do that when your main character is an antagonist, somebody that you don't want to redeem in the eyes of the audience who knows of the Joker as somebody who kills mercilessly and who is not a role model. So I don't really... So
if they had done the movie the way you were talking about, where you get rid of some of those cello scenes, I think they could have done a really good job of tying and then separating the Joker from the socio-political context, which would have made this much more interesting to me.
Right, like we could be sympathetic to the masses without being sympathetic to the Joker.
Bingo, bango.
Yeah.
And I just think that would have been like a much cooler movie, right? This idea that recognition is a politics.
He doesn't care about the revolution, right? I mean,
no, he's
the
recognition
try to separate them. I mean, we can say that his acts inspired this populist movement, and we can still, and you know, I like the fact that Thomas Wayne is characterized as a jerk, because that was always one of my criticisms of Taxi Driver, which is a big influence on this movie, is that the politician in that movie isn't really a jerk. There's really nothing that he does that makes you seem like, oh yeah, he's obviously corrupt, he's obviously in the pocket of somebody else, he deserves to die at the hands of Travis Bickle. That never happens. At least in this movie, they have a clearer antagonistic force.
Right, but I just think that like man was getting at, like you can have it be empathetic to the mob and not to the Joker in a way that like draws a distinction in types of recognition and types of desire for recognition, right? Like gamers rise up people on Twitter or whatever don't maybe have the same claim to like oppression and political viability as like, you know, oppressed minorities or like oppressed laborers, right? Like there are gradients of these kind of things and types of desires for recognition. And I think that the movie kind of flattens all of that out into one thing. Even though the Joker doesn't care about the revolution, people do. The distinction between those two urges for recognition isn't really drawn out in any meaningful way. I think there's a really cool argument to be made there that the movie like kind of gets towards, but I don't think it really lands on anything that to me is particularly like, whoa.
You got to make sure that you're also not being too preachy, though. And I think that if the Joker really did have a particular political project and led the masses to a very specific political action that would better everyone's situation, I think it would be probably a little bit too much for what is still essentially a comic book movie.
I'm about separating them even further. They flatten their idea that everyone needs recognition to this one thing that is the same between the Joker and these people. But the Joker's version of that and these people's version of that are very, very different.
I agree with Lux, and I also feel like they flatten out the like huge role that like masculinity plays in violence, because there are a lot of oppressed women in this movie and they're not like shooting people down, and I feel like that's just kind of a missed opportunity.
Yeah, this movie takes a big bite out of a big complicated pie and then kind of like spits it out after like 2 chews and is like, I ate it.
Yeah, I think ideologically, it kind of fails.
Because I didn't feel it very pressure. Like I didn't feel. I think Amanda and I both walked out of that saying we didn't think a lot during this movie. We were really just feeling it as a mood.
Yeah, for sure.
And as in terms of that ability for it to sort of haunt you. I mean, and again, I understand what you're getting at, Lux, but I just don't think that it's not sort of a particularly unique or fresh or new take, but it's just sort of reflecting on the theme of everyone wanting to be recognized, and they're accidentally finding a new role model or symbol or leader in this revolution. That's not necessarily new, but it's haunting to see that just reflected. You feel disenfranchised. You find somebody who's an exciting outlet for that. That is a haunting thing to see unfold, especially as we're so intimate with the Joker throughout the movie, to know what his real source is the fact that he's not masterminding, that he's not particularly smart. He's not like really, we've talked about this, he's not really planning out what's going to happen or unfold. And yet he becomes a very, very important symbol. And that part feels scary. So it was more the emotion that we walked out of that thing feeling haunted by how that could happen. And it tapped into this universal, long human need for revolution and need for breaking through the oppression that these characters feel, including the masses. So that was the piece that ultimately was like the most haunting to me, without even getting too intellectual about the plot or about what it was doing or not doing right, but more as just a film, as something to reflect on. It felt like, wow, it really took us there emotionally.
Yeah, and
I guess maybe I'm just like, and this is totally a possibility, maybe I'm just like too internet irony poisoned to have that. Like, that all seems, again, like that just seems like what you see if you look at the news.
Yeah, and I put that, I guess I put that whole voice, I put everything on suspension. I just suspended all of that, so those voices of criticism in order just to sort of let it wash over me and then reflect on that. And that part stuck.
I don't mean criticism towards the Joker or anything. I just mean that, like, we see people grabbing random weird idiot symbols all the time and gravitating towards them in need of recognition. So just the fact that the Joker did it as opposed to like real guys. Yeah,
I haven't seen it dramatized in a while. Usually you see a character who's a symbol of revolution, being the empathetic character, being the character that you're rooting for, a Che Guevara type, or somebody who's going to fight this revolution for you, and they have an ethos, and they seem to really be driving toward a revolution that's going to help people, or at least be their representative. And here you're seeing how that can go wrong in a dramatic version, and that was what was scary.
Yeah, I guess to the flip to that is also that, like, I'm big into the two Scorsese movies. This movie is ripping off pretty clearly, which both just make that argument in like way cooler ways, I think.
Yeah,
That's
so
fair.
And so maybe I'm just like, well, it's no King of Comedy or Taxi Driver, so meh.
I'm really interested. I'm surprised to hear you say that you like Taxi Driver, because I've seen Taxi Driver 3 times now. The first time I saw it, I liked it, and then the second 2 times, I liked it less and less. And now other than the fact that it's a great performance and that it's shot well, I don't see the appeal of that movie.
I feel like
For me, Taxi Driver does exactly what Jacob's describing the Joker doing.
Does he become a symbol? Like a huge, exciting symbol of revolution?
It traps you into a mentality.
I
he
think
becomes
that
a little bit like, I mean, well, at least he's maybe arguably imagining himself as like a symbolic, like
a hero. Or
yeah, exactly. I feel like it more is iconic because of the time it was released in. Like, I think people just weren't that used to compelling anti-heroes, and it was like super new in that way. I don't know if it would stand out as much if it was released now.
But Travis Bickle is more about, I'm going to clean up the streets. It's not about how the people who are pushed on the streets are victims. It's the fact that these people are trash and they need to be eradicated.
Like
and then if he arguably imagines himself as this hero who took it upon himself, this vigilante, to clean up the streets, it's still different than Joker, which argues that these people are living in squalor and because they've been put there by the rich or the fortunate that won't even recognize them as human. But let's talk more about these allusions, because there's a lot of allusions to a lot of films that all came out between roughly like 1974 and 1982 or something like that. So let's talk about Taxi Driver. So off the top, obviously mental illness, both Arthur Fleck and Travis Bickle are mentally ill. There's the whole thing about the city that they inhabit being a shithole. They're both seeking recognition by a woman that they love. There's a fixation on a politician, and I already talked about this, how Thomas Wayne is a little bit more of a dick in this one than the politician in Taxi Driver. And then there's the thing where the last thing that we see Travis Bickle do after he kills the whole room of the whole prostitution ring or whatever, he puts the finger guns to his head and goes, poof.
Yeah, and we see that a whole bunch of times. It's the first thing Sophie does when they're in the elevator together. And I never really attributed any meaning to that gesture. And I think in this movie, it's more of like
a sense of, hey, identify with me. I'm going through hell living in this city, living a life in poverty, fuck it. Like, whereas with Travis Bickle, I still don't know what it meant in Taxi Driver.
It was a good shot.
It was a good shot. Yeah.
I feel like I took it as like his hatred was ultimately for himself. Like he killed all these people, but ultimately, like what he was really trying to kill was the part of himself that he hated.
Was it the part of himself that wanted the young prostitute?
Maybe. I didn't think of. Yeah, I buy that.
Interesting.
Just theorizing on the spot.
Oh, Lux left the call accidentally, so he's going to join back in.
Oh,
Just so we're aware. But this, let's say, it's going great. Without Lux on the line. Just kidding, brother.
but more to the score. Like even in Taxi Driver, we hear more jazzy tunes as he goes through New York in this sleepless days.
It's such a mood.
Which worked on me the first time, and I just.
But I hated
can't
that
say.
movie. I really don't like that movie.
Neither do I.
It's just not a likable character. It's so gritty. But it's probably in a similar way that it's just like it's an emotion, and I don't know if it's not probably produced to be liked, kind of like a Lars von Trier movie.
Yeah,
it might be produced to be despised.
Or like Antichrist. Yeah,
I
Lars
love
von Trier
Antichrist. I love
Me too.
Antichrist.
Well, so do I.
Oh my god.
But I hate Melancholia as an example. It's like a movie that fucks with you so bad that you just don't even want to watch it. Like you just hate it so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Oh, hey, I'm back.
hey, buddy, welcome
Hey.
back.
Up. Missed you.
That was the weirdest shit in the world.
Anything you want to add about Taxi Driver before we move on?
Yeah, just that I think the comparison with Taxi Driver, and we get at this in the video, is that like it's a story about recognition, and it's like Jacob said, it's this a filmic experience of being like lulled into a psychology, right?
Yeah.
And that's like what seems to be like the impressive part of the Joker in both the accountings Amanda and Jacob are giving, and like for me, that's what Taxi Driver does.
Yeah, and that's right. I feel like you might almost feel like you want to wash yourself of having watched Taxi Driver because it just feels so gross. Like the whole of the jazz and the grittiness of the film stock and the character and what he's doing is all just disgusting.
You know what? Maybe it's because of Von Trier that I'm now desensitized that Scorsese, 70s Scorsese doesn't do it for me anymore.
You need Von
I need
Trier.
something
You need
much
something
harder.
way more fucked up.
2010s Von Trier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, like the other piece that I found was very fun was that because you're so intimate with Taxi Driver and you're so intimate with the Joker, we just hadn't spent this much time with him before. So for someone like me and Amanda who are not huge comic book people and we're not that affected or that influenced by the Joker over our whole lifetimes, like just to spend that much time with him was just interesting. But you go down that same rabbit hole like Taxi Driver, you're like, oh my God, I really know this person, and the more I know them, the more I'm scared. Of what they might unleash, who they are. I don't know. It just sort of, that distance that we have, I think, is actually healthy and probably a big part of why we're so into it.
Yeah. I mean, also, it kind of goads you into, it really does goad you completely into sympathizing with him, especially like earlier on, like when the bankers start beating him up on the subway, you're like, fuck these guys. And
yeah, that's
like,
true.
It dares you to be like,
I didn't think about that.
These assholes deserve to die.
Yeah. I didn't go there that far.
No, I'm joking.
But I agree with what Amanda's saying.
Yeah.
I do think that the movie does dare us to identify more with Arthur Fleck than Taxi Driver ever really does with Travis Bickle.
Yeah, because I never cared at all about him, about Travis Bickle.
Bickle. Yeah. But I want to transition to the next movie that this draws from, which is a movie that I love, which is The King of Comedy.
That's a better movie than Taxi Driver, for sure.
I think so, too. So some obvious ones. So Robert De Niro plays the talk show host in this movie, obviously an allusion to the character Rupert Pupkin that he plays in The King of Comedy, who is the Arthur Fleck character, but he is obsessed with a comedian that is played by Jerry Lewis in The King of Comedy. And another similarity with this and Taxi Driver is the actress who plays Sophie in Joker, who's what's her name, Zazie Bates or something like that. She looks very similar to the love interest in King of Comedy, who's played by Diane Abbott, and she's actually also in a scene early in Taxi Driver as a woman that Travis tries to hit on. There's also the whole theme of recognition, that Rupert is seeking recognition from Jerry Lewis's character as well as the comedy-loving audience at large. He does end up getting on his favorite talk show. In the case of The King of Comedy, it's because he blackmails his way on there. The thing I like about The King of Comedy that I don't like about Taxi Driver is that The King of Comedy is kind of an endearing film. we like Rupert Pupkin because he believes in his dream with such ferocity. And you can also walk away from the film with the message that, okay, this movie is kind of about the kind of craziness it takes to make it in the entertainment industry. Whereas in Taxi Driver, I guess it's really just about a mood. But I think you get the best of both worlds with King of Comedy.
Yeah, I always think of like Falling Down too. You ever seen that movie with Michael Douglas, I think?
Yeah.
Falling Down, so it's like a day, like a really bad day and a descent into becoming a serial killer, effectively. Reminds me a lot of a better version, a more relatable version of Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
But yeah, aside from what it is, like you're just watching and observing as a witness the descent. Aside from that, there's not much more going on.
And
Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I agree that King of Comedy is much more compelling because the protagonist actually like has a tangible goal, whereas the Joker does. I mean, he wants recognition, but beyond that, it's not for any like greater purpose. Like Pumpkin like wants Pumpkin. Whatever. I always get his name wrong. I think of it as Pumpkin in my head.
Blumpkin?
Like wants to share his art with the world or whatever. Yeah.
I also just think tonally it hit the nail on the head because it's all comedy. It's all laughs.
Mm-hmm.
There's no cello. The cello really is what killed me. Is the only thing that kills this movie for me.
I said, Jared, this movie really freaked me out. So I dropped Jared off. He comes back and he's like, it didn't really affect me. And too much cello.
It is true though.
Jared and our messaging on our work client, he was like too much. He was like, oh, and the cello. To which I responded all caps, so much cello. And we had a conversation about it's totally. That's part of why I find this movie, and we can get like let me know when you want me to talk about this. But that's part of why I find the movie so fucking parodic. Like the cello is a fucking joke.
I don't think that it's meant to be a joke. Yeah.
No,
at least to me, it reads like one. Like so much of the movie is so heavy-handed, the type of thing it wants to be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I think you're just giving
we live in a society meme.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're giving it too much credit.
I do wonder if it could have benefited from treating itself a little more like a comedy, because that would reinforce the way the Joker keeps saying, like, my life is a comedy.
Yeah. That was always my thing with the trailer, is that in the trailer it said, oh, I always thought of my life as a tragedy, but it's a comedy. And I was looking at this trailer, which took itself very seriously, and I was like, well, it seems like a tragedy.
Yeah.
And I would prefer it be a comedy.
Sorry, what?
I was going to say, and I would prefer it be a comedy.
Yeah, maybe that's part of why I'm reading it this way, is because it's all I fucking wanted was supposed to be a goddamn comedy. But, like, if there were, like, more comedic elements to this movie that felt more intentional or, like, less dry, depending on how you want to read it, like, then I think a lot of the stuff I was talking about before about distinguishing recognitions would kind of resolve itself, right? Because you'd have these people in the streets, like, taking this shit very seriously, and then our perspective as Fleck's perspective as, like, it's all a big goof, would have drawn, like, a really hard-line distinction between the two ideas of recognition, right? And I think that would have made both the drama of the movie and the ideology of the movie a lot clearer and more interesting.
Right.
And also it would have been more fun to watch because there'd be fun goofs. And
that's another thing that his mental illness, the nature of his mental illness, kind of adds to, is the fact that whenever he's laughing, it's not necessarily because he thinks anything is funny. Whereas if he was laughing because things are funny, then we would be able to draw that distinction more, because then we know he's not taking things seriously, but it's just a compulsion.
Yeah, the way they handled his mental illness, I think, fucks up so much about this movie for me.
But it added a creepy factor of this disorienting factor, right? Like our natural inclination anytime we hear laughter is to sort of feel like it's okay, and constantly we're being rubbed up against. We can see that he's struggling and crying and choking and hearing laughter. It's just like your mind is like, what? It's like scrambling. What's happening?
Yeah, in terms of putting you in his mind state, when he's on that stage doing stand-up and he's struggling not to laugh, you really feel for him.
Yeah.
Oh, it's cringe.
That's what
anxiety
I'm getting chills.
Feels.
Yeah.
I mean, that's again where like the performance is so unmistakable that it makes it hard to judge the movie objectively at times.
Yeah.
We got some good comments. Everyone's 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. Some good ratings here. Some people saying, don't criticize the cello, and other people saying that we should write a movie. So that does sound fun.
That does.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
We'll write our version of this.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, there are some days I like this movie a lot. So let's talk about Network. One of the best movies ever made.
Yes.
Yeah, the best movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the shot at all the TVs at the end
maybe Chinatown. One of the two best movies.
Those are both great ones.
Yeah.
So the shot of all the TVs at the end after Murray is killed is lifted from Network, and I think that it's mostly surface level. I think that the big thing that is taken from Network is that Arthur's speech on the Murray Show is akin to Howard Beale's "I'm mad as hell" speech.
Yeah.
Basically saying that you've got to assert that you're a human being. God damn it.
Yeah, same. It's the same exact sentiment. We were talking about that on the
Yeah.
car ride home. It's
Yeah.
same sentiment. The screens was so good.
Yeah.
So good. I don't know if there's much more than that, but that was like, it's the spectacle, and immediately that, I think it was like the immediacy and the speed too, with which his fame sort of propagated, right? As soon as that happened, because of the media, because of that news cycle, he became an instant hero. And that was the acceleration that was also scary.
And that happens
Yeah.
in both Taxi Driver and King of Comedy.
You know, I almost wonder if we should take him at his word when he says that he doesn't believe in anything, because when he's on the stage, he kind of seems like he does, right? Like he kind of says a mission statement.
He definitely, but I don't even know if he's aware of the social movement. I think that that's just what he's personally feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the mission statement, right, honestly is internally incoherent within the plot of the movie in the sense that he's like, the world's fucked up. You ignore all these people. It makes them all go crazy and angry. But in his personal experience, that's literally not why he's crazy and angry, right? He's crazy and angry because of all the child abuse. Spoilers. But like,
Well, we've done a lot of spoilers.
yeah.
yeah, fair enough. That was just pure reflex. But like the movie says, like society makes people crazy and fucked up. This guy is a symptom of that, but also is like, actually, it's not. He's not one of those. He actually has a specific causal relationship, and obviously, there's a societal relationship between like child abuse and domestic abuse and all that, and there's a whole system of networks of power that create that context. But within the context of like the movie and how the movie's framing stuff, those two things are pretty unrelated. And so it's a weird choice to me to make it as though like, hey, it's me, the jokester. Everyone's crazy because society's crazy, except me. I'm crazy because I got hit in the head a bunch of times.
I do feel like the best
it's
argument for
weird to
this movie as a comedy is when he says people need to be more civil, and like 5 seconds later shoots the guy in the head.
Yeah.
It's just that
Yeah,
I mean that can't possibly be taking itself seriously, right?
I need to see that. I need to see the scene again.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Yeah,
makes
that's
sense.
the thing. It's like, it's hard to tell.
I would love to watch this movie again and get Lux's reading that it's all deliberately kind of a farce and that it is
Yeah.
more of a comedy. I would love it if I was totally missing that, because at
Well,
least
just think
to
about
me,
like there's those scenes where like when he climbs in the fridge, or like breaking up the most visceral violent scene in the movie with a midget joke.
the thing is, none of the movies that this was inspired by are comedies. I mean, maybe The King of Comedy is, but Taxi Driver isn't. Network, I guess, kind of is.
Network's funny.
Yeah. But Mean Streets isn't.
It ain't no Hangover.
Yeah.
But even if this were like a drama that uses dry comedy to like make a satirical point, I think
No, we've
that's
seen, and
a
we
fair
love those
description.
kinds of comedies, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I could. Yeah, maybe it wouldn't be too crazy for Todd Phillips to go there, but I just didn't feel it that way at
Yeah,
all.
no, definitely
Maybe
in
it's
theater.
the tone though. Like, I mean, if you got a theater full of people laughing, like, it probably just takes one laugh to be like, oh shit, maybe I'm getting the tone all wrong.
Yeah.
In our theater, everyone was like, oh shit.
Yeah,
I
in
mean,
my,
that's-
in
that is
my
always a
theater,
huge part
someone
of
was
it.
just
Like,
checking
some
their
of my
phone all the
favorite-
time.
There's some movies that I thought were like incredible, where like actually I just had a great time in the theater, and then I watched the movie and I was like just okay. So definitely theatrical stuff definitely contributes to all that in a huge way.
I even feel like if I had gotten out of the theater and Jacob had been like, that was dumb, I wouldn't have been as like shaken up. It was that we were on the exact same level. So it really does show that like who you go to the theater with
It
matters.
changes
Oh, it
the
makes a
experience
huge
totally,
difference.
completely. But yeah, because I think we were both just spooked, and everyone coming out of the theater seemingly was like, ugh. Or
Yeah.
at least we
Yeah.
were really shaken. But it was all that cello.
All that cello, man.
You said something earlier that I wanted to come back to, something that was funny. What was it?
Talking to me
I didn't
or
think-
Lux?
Yeah, to you. You said something earlier that you wanted to kind of a reading on this film that was a little. I'll come back to it. I can't remember.
Okay. Well, next thing I want to go to is just the what's real and what's not real. So obviously the part with Sophie is not real. It's interesting that in both King of Comedy and Taxi Driver, the end is questionable, and both reflect on the sensationalism of the media, which we talked about before. There are some other things in the movie that I was curious if you guys thought could also be questioned. So is the whole scene with him on the Murray Show faked? Because it seems odd to me that Arthur admits that he murdered the three bankers and that Murray believes him pretty quickly.
It didn't feel fake to me.
Yeah, it'd be hard for that to read as fake given what happens in the rest of the movie.
Yeah,
Unless all of that's fake. And then I actually kind of thought that might be what happened, is that the end is the cut to he's been in Arkham the whole time just being a crazy guy.
right.
I wasn't sure about the Arkham scene. Like the Arkham
Yeah.
scene we were talking about, like what is was he there before? There's a scene where he kind of like bangs his head against the glass, and we're like, remember earlier in the film, it's like a flashback. I'm like, is that now or is this before? I think we were saying, like you mentioned, Amanda, like once he sort of dons the makeup, it's sort of like that's who he is now forever in a way, and like he's in a place where he's just sort of in the asylum and he's just a normal guy again.
Yeah. I kind of hated that. I kind of didn't want to cast doubt on what we
ending?
had just seen. Yeah.
Oh, right. Well, I was like, maybe the whole movie was like in his head.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what the ending says to me, except that feels so silly given everything else about the movie.
Exactly.
I mean, I've heard people cast out on the fact that the whole revolution at the end might have been fake.
Yeah.
But what about the photo that he looks at? He has a photo of his mom when she was young, and on the back it says, "You have beautiful eyes," from Thomas Wayne. So are we meant to believe that she put that there, or that someone wrote that and forged his handwriting? Is it not actually his handwriting? I mean, because I think that we can all agree that somebody who's really, really rich and powerful can have somebody committed to an insane asylum if they don't want some kind of story getting out about a bastard child. Mm-hmm. So
For sure.
Did you guys think that there's still some
thought it was
ambiguity?
ambiguous. I thought there definitely was a little bit, because I thought like it just seemed a little it seemed so suspicious, right? That she had such a clear story for him. He seemed so prepared with his story about like this kid being definitely not his child, and then that moment again, but a lot of it was like this unreliable narrator. Like, what are we seeing here?
Right.
Like, what picture is that? I mean, is that really his handwriting? It was beautiful handwriting. So I thought, like, is that really Thomas Wayne's handwriting? I don't know.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if she could have done that as her own little fantasy. But then he adopted after all?
But I don't know. I mean, I guess if we just assume that the rich and powerful can do almost anything, we can say that they can also forge those documents that say that he was adopted.
Right.
Like between his delusions and the degree of power Thomas Wayne wields, it's like any of that shit could be fake.
Yeah.
All right, last thing I want to talk about is the controversy.
I have one more thing that might have been fake or not that I want to get y'all's
Oh, yeah,
opinions
sure.
about. That's cool. There's just some wild set deck, and in particular, the headlines on the newspapers are really absurd. I don't know if y'all were reading them.
Oh, no.
But they're all sort of like killer clown madness sweeps Gotham, or like clowns going wild, and things like that were like kind of silly and weird to me. And I was wondering if that's part of, I mean, to me, that was part of the whole, it's a big joke, but also like maybe that's part of the whole delusion, right? That he's like creating this narrative around himself. And making it the news in his own mind, if that makes sense.
Well, interestingly, the news clippings at the end of Taxi Driver are likely fake.
Yeah.
I think that it's more than likely that they're fake. I don't know. I mean, it could also just be that Gotham is a shithole and the media is super sensationalized.
Yeah, totally. The other thing that felt fake to me, but probably was just like a weird piece of set decoration, was, I don't know if y'all caught this, but during the riots, one person appears to be waving around a chair from Pier 1 Imports.
Nope, didn't
like
catch
one of those
that.
like stitched
Definitely
thatched
missed that.
chairs.
Do you think like the whole movie is a commentary on like the line between comedy and drama, or comedy and tragedy? Because the laughing is sort of on that brink and on that line. He's a comedy director and he's directing a very...
That would be a masterstroke if that was what he meant to do. I want to have a movie where half the theater wants
hilarious.
to cry and half of the theater is laughing.
Like, it really could be, and maybe this is just like the way that I watch movies, which is so hyper attentive to like technical detail, unless the script like really sweeps me off my feet, which this movie did not. I just I direct film and shoot things all the time, so like that's how I think about movies when I'm watching them. And so watching it that way, there was just so many like little goofs and weird things about the design, the decoration, cinematography. Which again, the cinematography was excellent,
gorgeous.
And if there's one thing every other superhero movie except for Thor Ragnarok can take from this movie, it's that you're allowed to use fucking colors in your movie. Because this movie used colors to excellent effect.
Yeah.
So I watch movies that way, and that's everything's in my head. And like looking at it that way, there was just so much weirdness and like the disjunct between how colors and cinematography match the action, or like weird things in the background and all this stuff. And that's maybe part of why I think this movie is like a goof 'em up. Because there's all this weird stuff happening, like right behind the thing, like kind of Kansas City Shuffle style. Like you're looking over here, but all the weird shit's happening over here.
But that's the balancing act again of comedy and tragedy. Even like the gun, like the faux gun shooting thing. I mean, she's using it as a complete joke. He's not thinking of it that way at all. And when he does the same symbol, it becomes terrifying.
Or even the joke,
misinterpretation.
even the jokes that he tells on the Murray Franklin show. He says, "Knock knock, who's there? It's your son who's been killed in a drunk driving accident."
Right. Ha ha ha.
Yeah,
Yeah.
classic
Yeah,
dead baby
it was
jokes
style
fucking
joke.
nuts.
Yeah. So, this is the part that I wanted to get back to. Was you said that anyone who's a big Joker fan would look at this and say this is a joke.
Or I
What
said
do you
that the
mean by
Joker.
that?
Well, because in The Killing Joke, which is pretty essential
Yeah.
Joker lore, he tells this whole backstory and then basically says, "Ha ha, that was all
Yeah.
a joke." And it was similarly a very kind of. It was a sad story, and
But if you have any ground, you just shatter it.
and then we see something similar with Rick and Rick and Morty in that he gives you some sort of like
Sappy
sad backstory
story.
and then rips it out from you, and that's what these kind of nihilist characters like to do.
Right.
And so I felt like this is just another one of those stories that the Joker would try to bait you with and then rip it out from you and laugh.
Right.
Like,
Right.
every major modern version of the Joker is so the opposite of this. Like, you've got the Morrison Joker, who's like the only hyper sane person in a world gone mad. You've got the Scott Snyder Joker, who's like this timeless, weird proto being, or like weirdo who messes with history all the time. Like, they're all way more ambiguous in the idea of time and like their position within like the world than this guy is. So this is like a radical departure from all of that. And so even though I'm not like I'll confess, I'm not a big fan of the Joker character generally. Especially the modern ones. I actually kind of like the Joker who's just like a guy who fell in a vat of acid and now he's weird. But like, I don't love the modern Jokers, but Jared's totally right that this is so, from the idea of like what comics teach us the Joker's about, this is like
Another story to be shred up and torn up.
Yeah.
yeah, this is just this like, yeah, I don't think you put it better than Jared's. Like, this, in that context, this is a joke.
Does he make himself that pathetic in any of his origin stories that he does choose to tell?
Yeah, in The Killing Joke, he's similarly so beaten down by life. His girlfriend dies. He is a horrible stand-up comedian. He finds out that his girlfriend dies while she was pregnant. Everything just goes to shit, and he just snaps and goes mad.
It's like one, yeah.
But then he's like, haha, that was a joke. All right, so the controversy. So if the movie is saying that the only way to be recognized as human beings by the rich and powerful is by violence, is that a problem?
I mean, it's honestly, I've been thinking about that a lot since I saw it, and just the question of like whether art needs to be moral and whether it's literally bad for the world that this movie exists and is going to be seen by everyone in the country. And I'm super conflicted. Like, I really don't know. I mean, I feel I'm super against like censorship of any kind, and like I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, I just think philosophically speaking, you kind of have to gradiate these things, right? And you also have to gradiate what constitutes violence. Right? Like, a big, loud, angry protest at a factory that isn't paying its workers probably is a good thing. A
sure.
big, loud, angry neo-Nazi march down the street from my house, not as cool. And so, like, there's a gradation here, right? And there's also other forms of violence, right? Like, there's actual like riots in the streets, violence, a la things that happen in Hong Kong, which probably we'd all say is relatively justified. Sorry, China. That don't
ban us.
Yeah, please let us have our podcast.
We're already banned. YouTube's banned.
But there's that. There's there's just these gradations of these kind of things, right? That's part of my issue with this broad sweeping idea about recognition and violence is that in many cases historically, this kind of action has been very, very good.
Right.
And has had very, very good outcomes. It has also been very, very, very bad. And so I think the way people are talking about it as though this is one thing with one shape and we can talk about it in one way is kind of crazy. Because it's like, we say in the video, like, this is the sort of political framework that led to like women getting to vote and like black people getting to go to the same schools as white kids and like the minimum wage and like weekends.
For sure.
Like they all came from the same impulse.
You're saying that the same action of revolution, can lead in two directions or whatever, or any number of directions.
An infinite number of directions. And so I think it's weird to say, right, that this movie is telling us a bad thing, that like when everyone gets mad and starts acting mad, we have a huge problem on our hands. It's like, well, not always.
I think that was the part that was
makes
chilling.
the world a better place.
That was one of the pieces that was chilling to me, was to see the same action that leads to positive revolution, the same idea of assembly and revolution, which can lead in a good place. Seeing it kind of misconstrued and seeing that same same mentality and that same kind of everyone rah against for the same cause and coming together but being blind to the reality of who they're praising. That was and what those repercussions could be. That was the part that again felt very prescient and very scary. That was the source of that horror, which was like, oh, I'm observing how that can go. I mean, again, this is not. This is not like a neo-Nazi rally. This is the incentive is coming from a place of, hey, revolution because we feel disenfranchised, because we want to be recognized, and yet it's a scary outcome. It can be a very super scary outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big thing that's definitely true, and like you see it, I mean, in American leftist activism all the time, like people picking bad role models for their frameworks, right? Like you get. Even with the people I work with, like you get like Maoists and Stalinists who like do want to like use riots as a violent tool to like just hurt people. And like that's not cool or politically productive at all. But that is a real problem that does exist that like you have to deal with if you're going to be like doing political activism.
I mean,
and I think that's one thing, and I think you're right, Jacob, that's one thing with the movie that did resonate to me beyond my like general frustration with it was that like at least understands that like when you pick, if you structure your argument, if you structure your political rally like an arrow, and the tip that you pick is someone gross and bad, the rest has to follow.
And it feels like absurd. It's kind of like Life of Brian or something. Like, everyone's following Brian like he's the Messiah, and I'm not the Messiah, and like only the true Messiah denies his identity, and it's sort of like this ridiculous idea of following.
Yeah,
that becomes haunting. Mm-hmm.
I know we talked about this a couple times on the podcast. Ryan and I are usually on one side, and sometimes Austin's on the other side. But I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. But I mean, Ryan has often said that you don't censor art, no matter it's not art's job to teach morality, and I largely agree with him. However, I also think that we're all faced with a reality today to where we all know that it does. Like it ought not teach morality, but it does.
Sort of like a moral dilemma of like smoking or whatever.
And I think that we should be able to recognize that even though it shouldn't teach morality and then it does, we should still be able to say, even though it does, we should do nothing. And I think that for me, something I think about a lot is we as a society need to learn how to grapple with the fact that we can recognize a problem and still decide to do nothing about it. So, for example, the example I always point to is there was a study that I heard about a long time ago about how bumper stickers create more road rage. This is a problem we should do nothing about. You're not
going to ban a bumper sticker or whatever,
or bumper stickers in general. Even because we can identify the fact that bumper stickers create road rage and road rage is a problem, we should be able to look at the problem, understand it, and be able to sit with it and understand that there are some problems that you just can't fix and that you ought not fix.
What's happening with mobile devices, like kids growing up with iPads.
Yeah.
Is that it's sort of like that's a path. You can implement a little technology to monitor that time that you're spending, but we're also in a way saying, I guess, if the option is either ban technology or this is the consequence,
it's like
we're saying we're going to move
watch
forward.
Demolition Man. Has anyone seen Demolition Man? It's all about It's all about this. It's all about how Sylvester Stallone wakes up in a society where everything that is a problem, everything that creates a bad outcome is banished, and it creates a society that cannot function when a terrorist comes around, and all the police are ineffectual and the whole society crumbles. And ultimately the film it's like a middle ground. Sylvester Stallone says, you can't just whitewash everything away that's a problem, but you also can't ignore all these things that's a problem. And I think that it's a very wise film starring Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah. I feel like I don't know, when I left the theater I was thinking there's no way this movie can make the world less violent. Like
unless people all walk around saying, "Oh wow, I might band around and support something that might have something else going on."
Or if somebody says, "I really need to stay on my meds."
Yeah.
That would be a great message to take away from this movie for sure.
As a known meds taker, I'll second that.
Yeah, same. But I wonder, like, should movies that do somewhat condone violence or at least make us sympathize heavily with people who perpetrate like completely random acts of violence, should they exist? I don't know. Like, I don't think they should be banned. I'm more just like, did nobody at any point in the making of this film wonder if it was going to make things more violent?
I think
they probably
Warner
did.
Brothers did some sort of donation. I think I was talking to my friend Mike yesterday. I think they did something to the effect of, sure, we will do, I can't remember exactly what it was, but the studio did something. I mean, clearly, you can't watch this movie at the studio and say, yeah, this is like another release. This is just like Paddington Bear or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
clearly.
This movie wishes it was as good as Paddington. That movie's incredible.
But yeah, there's like this responsibility, and I don't know exactly what they did with it, but I think you're right.
I think a lot
that
of this
it's-
comes
yeah,
from
it's violent.
like a lot of this comes from like a broad scale social failure, right? In the sense that like Jared said, like it shouldn't matter if movies teach us right from wrong because like there should be other things that do that.
Right.
Right? Like it shouldn't have to be like, someone's going to learn about ethics from the Joker. It's like that wouldn't happen if like someone was teaching them this shit.
But we don't
I
have
think it's
religion no more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like broad social failing that like
Movies
I mean
are
one big thing that
religion.
like bothers me that I complain about all the fucking time is this idea that like every possible like position and argument is always equidistant from the truth and that we're all just working towards a truth but starting as far away as each other, which just isn't true, right? Like some people are more right than others and there's more effective ethical frameworks than others, and like these are the kind of things that like people should be forced to challenge and think about and reconcile with. But they're not. And so because they're not, they just fill that vacuum with whatever they want. And so that means that things like The Joker or any other movie can fill that slot. So the danger that sort of Amanda's isolating exists only because like we're not doing a good job at like giving people other ways to learn this shit.
Like as an example of Joker, like where is Joker going to learn? Where was he going to learn his morality? Where was he going to grab that from his experience
right,
and background?
like-
I guess this
Exactly.
is the
Society.
cautionary tale,
I
right?
think Lux would have argued that the social services didn't need to be cut; they needed to be amped up.
Hell yeah.
For sure.
Tax Thomas Wayne, give the Joker
She
more
wasn't
meds.
listening to him.
All right, let's go into the mailbag. It is past 5:30. If you need to go.
Oh, okay. I'm good for a little more.
Okay, so we've got a couple emails about the Joker. So this one is from Dan. By the way, you can hit us up at movies@wisecrack.co. So this is from Dan. Dan says, seeing as you're going to be covering Joker this week, I had a question about the controversy surrounding it. My question is regarding what you think this movie is, why you think this movie is the center of this discussion. There have been plenty of works throughout history that have focused on similar themes. For example, why was nobody making these comments when Breaking Bad was the biggest show on TV? That show was all about a guy who was driven to a life of despicable activity by a society that had wronged him. In that case, he was wronged by a medical system that pushes huge bills upon people who have no realistic way of paying them, similar to the way Arthur's therapy and drug prescription funding was cut. Why is Joker specifically getting all this attention when things like Breaking Bad and Taxi Driver exist, but no one talks about the possible negative consequences of those? So what do you guys think?
Because a dude dressed up as the Joker
Yeah,
shot in a movie
I-
theater.
Yeah, for sure.
Joker and Aurora, yeah.
Yeah. Also, the people dying in Breaking Bad were members of like, you know, the underbelly of society that most people didn't necessarily relate to the way they might relate to the people who the Joker kills, I think. Is that part
Right,
of
like
it?
the movie asserts a causality that it admittedly is way more relatable than Breaking Bad.
Yeah, for sure.
Like we're definitely not all
Well, and they're in theaters. Don't forget, like we're talking about a sort of a public terrorist act, right? It's a different story in that people are congregating in a way that everyone's watching at home on AMC or something or Netflix.
Totally. And we're not all fucking chem teachers with cancer selling meth to save our family. Like, but I think we can all agree that there are times where we felt like society's kind of let us down. Like to go back to the meds thing, the fact that to pay so much for mine fucking sucks. And that shouldn't be the case. And so that feels like a social failure. And so like you can empathize with a lot of the ideas in the Joker. And so it's sort of easier to imagine a straight line, kind of what Jacob was getting at earlier, a straight line from like, hey, here's the problem of society, it's falling apart, to, hey, we're all angry, we're going to dress up as clowns and kill Thomas Wayne.
Also,
Like the straight line's pretty clean there. And so it's way easier to imagine a like terrifying outcome than it would be otherwise.
for sure. Also, the change on Breaking Bad was so gradual that it wasn't as shocking. In this movie, it was deliberately really shocking when he became violent, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they had a big snap. Although fucking the needle drop of fucking Rock and Roll Part 2 by Gary Glitter was some
There
truly
was great
insane
music.
shit.
There were some weird little cues like
Yeah,
that.
for sure.
Also, that was
the
pretty
movie's
funny.
a joke.
You know, like I said, I think this movie might just be a line about the line of comedy and tragedy.
If I'm gonna watch it again with that in mind, and if it resonates, I will love the shit out of this movie. I'll be like,
Jared,
this is the most brilliant
I'll get
thing
to-
I've ever seen.
I get to LA tomorrow night. I will go with you to see this movie.
All right, we'll talk about it. All right, this next one is from Brad. Brad says, I wish I loved this movie more, but I can't help but feel it somehow lost its criticism of society failing to save Arthur. It's incredibly sad to watch Arthur's outlook on his already depressing life get crushed throughout the film, but I felt all of that got swept aside in favor of tying this story into Batman's origin. As a Batman fan, it's hard to watch the recontextualization of Thomas Wayne into a Trumpian figure, but for this movie, it could have worked if Thomas Wayne was the one to cut funding for mental health services. As it stands, I just don't buy the poor, pathetic Arthur Fleck as either a symbol of revolution or as the criminal mastermind who will one day terrorize Gotham. I thought he'd go through with his suicide plan, and that would inspire someone else to one day pick up the mantle of the Joker. So I'd love to see a sequel where the caring and compassionate have their day, but I don't think that would come from this Batman. What do you think? Would having a brutal capitalist for a father create a Batman who kills, aka Batfleck? Or would the opposite happen, and instead of a fascist Dark Knight, we get a pacifist White Knight? So the one thing I'll say about this is, this is from Brad. First of all, I don't really think that we're supposed to believe that this is the Joker that Batman will one day grow up to fight. He would be too old, right? I always thought of this as the beginning of the Joker mythos, that one day some other insane person is going to look back to these riots and look back to the figure of the Joker that inspired so much chaos, and he's going to use that figure as the inspiration for his persona. That's how I've always
distance
rated
for killing Thomas Wayne that way, sort of as a avatar for a Joker with the masked rioter.
Well, it's I believe only in the Tim Burton Batman that the Joker kills his parents. Usually it's just some guy. I think it's some guy named Joe Chill. He kills.
It's usually Joe Chill.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with that idea, Jared, that like this can't be the Joker, but like that the symbol of the Joker as attached to the death of Batman's parents like becomes a very obvious symbol for whoever becomes the Batman antagonist to take up. Like, it's me, the ghost of the guy who killed your parents, kind of tangentially. Haha. Seems like a viable symbolic jump.
Yeah. All right, this next one's from Jake. He says, hi, everyone, my name is Jake, and the scene with Thomas Wayne on the television calling the poor of Gotham clowns really stuck out to me. I'm studying to be a history teacher, and Thomas Wayne seemed to embody the philosophy argued in Andrew Carnegie's book, The Gospel of Wealth. For those not familiar with the text, during the Gilded Age of the United States, the income inequality gap was so massive, with monopolists like Rockefeller and Carnegie controlling almost every aspect of life, such as oil, steel, railroads, banking, urban planning, and politics, leaving the average person or poor people to be just pawns to their every desire. Wayne says that as mayor, he will lift everyone out of poverty in Gotham, and his attitude reeks of the belief that the philanthropy of the wealthy is the only charity or outside assistance that is needed, as suggested by Carnegie. Further, the rich members of society, because they are rich, know better than the poor commoners on how to run a society because they have succeeded in said society. I was wondering if you agree with my reading of Thomas Wayne. Thank you guys for everything you do, and keep up the awesome work.
This is exactly why I wanted to like this movie so bad. Because this movie fucking goes at the lie that rich people are going to save everyone.
For sure.
Which is a thing that you guys all know, think is insane. And so as soon as that shit was happening, I wanted to like this movie so much more than I did because of that. Because I do think that's a totally accurate read, that they're positioning part of the failure as this idea that everyone accepts that Thomas Wayne, rich man, knows what to do because he's Thomas Wayne, rich man. And I think that that's like a huge part of why, like, I think that's one of the more sympathetic parts of the movie to me is this idea that like by defaulting to like doing what the rich people say, look what happened to Gotham. It fell the fuck apart, and social services get cut, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what is Thomas Wayne going to do to fix that? He doesn't seem like the kind of guy who's going to be like, tax me more, please.
Yeah. All right, we're going to do one last one. We're going to skip the voicemails, but if you guys do want to send us a voicemail, 213-534-8807 or 21-ELF-HUT-07. This last one is from Martine. He has some questions about Ad Astra, but we're going to skip that. Just focus on the Joker today. He says, since it had a great opening weekend, regardless of some bad juju, what's your opinion on what will happen business-wise? Do you think this will open the door for more comic book character studies, or good old Hollywood will just take the wrong lesson and do some gritty spin-off comic book IP? Totally not rhetorical. I, for one, am an optimist that movies throw a that movies throw a wrench into Hollywood's conventional wisdom, and we might see more of this and or Loganish takes rather than further insistence on building universes. I certainly hope so. I think so. This movie made a lot of money over the weekend.
Yep.
I've had some people just in conversation pitch me ideas on these kind of versions. One of my favorite one was this woman who used to work with us named Siobhan. I'm totally giving her credit for this because this is her idea and it's amazing. But she wants to do a Star Wars movie called Palpatine, and it's about Palpatine as a young lawyer in the Galactic Senate.
That's great.
And he becomes from a idealist to a cynic who will one day become a Sith Lord.
Brava.
I would
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I would pay to see that,
That
movie.
rule.
Fuck yeah.
Totally.
And I would love to see all sorts of movies like that. You know, just like the Lincoln lawyer but in space.
Hell
Why
yeah.
not?
If it takes a comic book character to get people to the movies and we can make good movies again, that sounds great.
Yeah.
That sounds terrific.
Does sound like a good compromise for sure.
That's, I think, what happened here. Todd Phillips
Yeah.
like, I want to make a really good movie. They're like, you can only make a good movie with a big budget if it's a comic book movie. And it's like, okay, I'll
Yeah.
figure that out. And Logan was terrific too. Totally a crossover kind of movie for people like me and Amanda who were just more into like dramas. This is really cool and bringing us over. Do you think this will have a sequel? Probably not. Right? Like, I can't imagine. Like, will Joaquin Phoenix do another? Like, first of all,
Oh,
do
it
you
might
think
be
this-
in the world. I don't know if
In the
we're
world.
going to be another one with Joaquin Phoenix, but they might continue on this world somehow. I
Yeah.
mean,
Who knows?
anything's
Yeah.
possible.
And if DC and Warner Brothers have any kind of if history repeats itself there, hopefully they don't screw it all up, and like not continue a great legacy like the Nolan left.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they'll do those.
I think you don't want
weird...
you don't want this to continue though, Lex, right? You want this to go.
No, this is fine. Like I'm not opposed to this movie in like any sort of like intense like serious way. I just think that like I said, I think ideologically a lot of people are making a bigger deal out of it than it actually is. I think it's a fine movie. I think it's very good as a satire if that's what it's trying to do. But I think that it's cool to make ambitious alternate frame comic book stories. That's what I like about that's the comics I like are like that, right? Like the only Batman books I like are the one where he's like straight up a detective. Where it's like gothic noir shit, not like superhero stuff. Like I like that with all comic book stuff, and I think it's a really easy in. And I'd like to see more in this world because like there's stuff in this movie, like I said, that I really liked. I just like I think that the only way I can really describe it is like this movie tried to like this movie had eyes bigger than its stomach in a lot of ways. And I think that it suffers for that in a lot of ways.
Hey, but at least it swung for the fences.
Totally.
Yeah, no,
That's true.
I respect the
yeah,
hell out of
Going
that.
for
that's
it.
for sure.
It was
I mean,
bold.
look, I'd rather see a movie like this that like tries really hard and biffs it than a movie that just doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
This was the phantom thread of comic book movies. Hell yeah.
Oh man,
right, guys.
Phantom Thread is a perfect movie.
We are going to sign off for now. Next week, we're doing the Breaking Bad movie. So that comes out on Friday on Netflix. So until then, thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Lux, for joining me. And we'll see you next time.
Toodles.
Bye.
Peace.
Later.
Live from Hollywood, California. We're out.
Peace.